What's up, folks? It's your boy Coach Ty back at you with another one, and today I've got a special video for Workout Wednesday. How I finally got my arms to grow. Arms were always a quote-unquote problem area for me, and they are for a lot of gentlemen. A lot of guys don't get the arm growth that they wanted, so I'm going to tell you the exact steps I took to finally start seeing consistent growth in both my biceps and triceps. Let's get into it. All right, first thing we're gonna do is break down the exercises, and then we're going to kind of break down the structure of how you should program all this stuff. So first thing, we'll start with the bicep exercises. Exercise number one is the Bayesian, I've heard it pronounced both ways, curl. This is the creation of Menno Henselmans. I've made multiple videos that feature this exercise because it's one of my absolute favorite bicep exercises. You're gonna face away from a cable stack. I prefer doing this with both arms because once you start getting a little bit heavier, being pulled to one side by doing it unilaterally can present a bit of a challenge for staying upright and stable. So I prefer doing these with both arms instead of just one, but works totally fine with both. Now, the great thing about this exercise is that it's going to really lengthen your bicep or stretch your bicep. We know from the research that the biceps can and do experience stretch-mediated hypertrophy. And this is one of the key shifts in my program design that finally got my arms to begin growing, is doubling down on exercises that lengthened the muscle. So back to the Bayesian curl. Make sure you stand fully upright and keep your arm glued in at your side. Now with the cable pulling you from behind, that's gonna really lengthen that bicep in that position. If you let your entire arm track backward, you're gonna start lengthening the anterior delt more so than the bicep. And obviously we wanna keep this focused on the bicep. Again, make sure you keep your arm totally glued in. Push your chest forward slightly, and you should feel a bit of a stretch when you're in that elbow extended position. As you curl, lean forward. Now, what you're doing by leaning forward is putting your bicep in a better position to get a good contraction. It's a similar concept as the lat prayer, if you've seen me talk about that exercise in my simplified series or in my lat video, where by shifting the orientation of your torso in relation to the line of resistance, which is the cable, you can get a longer range of motion that way. So if you stay totally upright for the entire exercise, once you get to about 90 degrees, there's not gonna be very much tension on the bicep anymore. By leaning forward, you will keep tension on the bicep for a longer range of motion. Exercise number two, and you've got two options here. I would go either with a hammer curl variation or a reverse curl variation. This exercise is not necessarily for the bicep. It's more so for your brachialis and brachioradialis. The brachioradialis being the most superficial muscle on the radial side of your forearm, and the brachialis being a muscle that tucks underneath the bicep. The brachioradialis is actually a stronger elbow flexor than the bicep when your forearm is between supination and pronation, so here. But the brachioradialis is also heavily involved when you are in pronation, or palms down like in a reverse curl. So we want to train the brachioradialis because that's going to beef up your forearms a little bit. And also at the same time, we'll be killing two birds with one stone by training the brachialis because again, it tucks underneath your bicep. By growing the muscle underneath the bicep, your biceps will thus look bigger. So for the particular exercises, again, we've got hammer curl and reverse curl. I also prefer doing these kind of Bayesian style with the resistance coming from behind me, again, so I can lengthen those muscles. But another option that you have here is an incline curl. With the incline curl, make sure, again, try not to let your arm track too far behind you, so you put the emphasis on lengthening the brachioradialis instead of the anterior deltoid. And then my final bicep exercise that I have for you is the cable twisting curl. And you can also do this with a dumbbell. Just make sure you have the resistance offset in your hand. So if you're using a dumbbell, grab the dumbbell all the way, pause. Hey, yo, make sure you grab the dumbbell all the way at the top of the bell so the dumbbell is offset in your hand. If you're doing it with cables, pull the handle on the nylon strap attachment all the way to one side so the cable is coming out of the pinky side of your hand. Again, this will offset the resistance. So when you perform the twist, you have to twist against resistance. One of the functions of the bicep is to supinate your forearm. So essentially what we're doing here is training two functions of the bicep simultaneously. One, elbow flexion by curling, and two, supination by twisting. Now, a lot of people do twisting curls, but they don't offset the resistance. So you have the dumbbell just in the middle of your hand, you're not loading the twisting. You're essentially twisting for no reason. So make sure you make that distinction when you perform these exercises. Next up, tricep exercises. First one I'm gonna give you is called the Skullover, or I sometimes refer to it as the rolling tricep extension. So you're going to get on either an incline or a flat bench. Begin by performing a skull crusher motion and then let your upper arm track all the way back behind your head while your elbow is flexed. This is gonna really stretch, that's the word of the day, stretch out your tricep. We also know from the research that the triceps can and do experience stretch-mediated hypertrophy. We also know from a recent study that the overhead tricep extension performs better than pushdowns for tricep growth, likely because of the lengthening of said muscle. And speaking of overhead tricep extension, that's our next exercise, the single arm overhead tricep extension. Now, I like doing these single arm purely because when I'm doing these with a dumbbell or if I'm doing them with the bar attachment on a cable, if I'm doing both arms, the amount of weight I have to use gets very challenging to get into position. So to avoid that, use single arm and go lighter. The other thing that's nice about single arm is you can really adjust the direction that the resistance is coming from. So I like to have the resistance not just coming from behind me with the cable, but to the side. So instead of my arm being up here in this position, I'm more so outward. This puts my shoulder in a much more comfortable position. Whereas if I'm elbows in with my arm overhead, I get a little bit of shoulder discomfort. You can do it either way, whatever feels most comfortable on your shoulder, just giving you a couple of options. And exercise number 3 is going to be the good old-fashioned push down. Now, like I said, the overhead tricep extension and exercises in which the arm is over the head where you're lengthening the tricep are going to perform better for muscle growth, but the push down is still a very effective exercise, especially when you use this final technique, blood flow restriction. So this is another thing that I added into my arm training that made a massive difference. So really quickly, the blood flow restriction protocol for your arms, you're gonna cuff off just below your shoulder joint. You wanna use something a little thinner and skinnier than what I'm using here in this video, but all I had was knee wraps, so that's what we rolled with when we were recording. On a scale out of 10, you want a 7 as far as tightness. You don't want it so tight that you start to get tingling or that your arm starts to turn blue. That's too much blood flow restriction, but you want enough that you start to see a little bit of vascularity in your forearms. After you're cuffed off, what I like to do for the arms is perform a push down and usually my hammer or reverse curl variation combined with it. Do 30 reps of the push down, 30 reps of the hammer or reverse curl, rest 30 seconds, 15 reps of the push down, 15 reps of the reverse curl, rest 30 seconds, 15 reps, and you are done. Now this is going to be the most, how do I put it? The most wonderfully awful pump you have ever gotten. Meaning, it's going to be the biggest pump you've ever gotten, And because of that, it's gonna hurt like hell. Blood flow restriction is quite painful. So steel your spine before you start doing these. But the great thing about blood flow restriction is it allows you to use a fraction of the weight you would otherwise use. So you get none of the central nervous system damage that you might otherwise get. Now, blood flow restriction does seem to induce about as much muscle damage as doing heavier training. And it's commonly thought that blood flow restriction does, and I even thought this, that blood flow restriction does less muscle damage than heavier training. But again, that seems to not be the case based on some recent research. Okay, so those are some exercises and techniques. How are we gonna structure all this? Well, lucky for you, over here, every day is arm day. But you might not like how this is structured, or it may sound weird to you at first, but stick with me here. We're gonna do a 3-day split. Day 1 will be our Skullover or rolling tricep extension and our Bayesian curl. We're only going to do 2 sets each of these exercises, and that's it. So this is a very small amount of volume done in one workout. And I know you might be used to doing a full-on arm day. However, based on the fiber typing of the biceps and the triceps, and they are very fast twitch dominant. They're some of the most fast twitch dominant muscles in the body. They don't need very much volume for growth, and they also fatigue very quickly. So the problem with my old arm training is I would absolutely smash my arms. So this is tip number, I forget what tip I'm on, 3, maybe. Do less volume than you might be doing already. What tends to happen is we dig ourselves into a really big fatigue hole that we can't quite get out of. If the muscle is just too fatigued to recover, then ultimately you're not gonna see optimal growth. So we wanna do just enough volume, not too much, not too little, obviously, but just enough. We also know that doing more than 4 sets for a given body part within one workout is generally redundant. And this comes from the frequency meta-analysis that was done not too long ago, where they found doing, again, more than 4 sets was, they went as far as calling them wasted sets. You build muscle up to a point, and then you hit a point of diminishing returns after doing more than that within the context of just one workout. So if we know that's the case, and we also know that the biceps and triceps are very fast twitch dominant, again, I think 2, maximum 3 sets is all you're going to need. And also because they're fast twitch dominant, we're gonna keep the rep ranges relatively low. So I would go between 4 and 8. Again, I know that sounds crazy. 4 to 8 reps on both our Skullover and our Bayesian curl. So relatively heavy for 2 sets. Maximum 3, that's it. Stop right there. Day 2, we're gonna do our blood flow restriction. And again, for the blood flow restriction, you're going to combine a tricep pushdown along with either a cable hammer curl or reverse curl. I already went through the protocol on that, but I'm gonna put it up on the screen here again, just in case you need to see it. And moving on. Day number 3, we've got our single arm overhead tricep extension, or whatever overhead tricep extension variation you prefer, along with our cable twisting curl. Once again, we're going to do 2 sets for each of these exercises, and to vary up the rep range a tad bit, we'll go 6 to 10 reps. Our day 1 and day 3 exercises will lengthen, again, stretch, under load, these muscles. We do also know from the research that lengthening a muscle under load fatigues the muscle more than not doing so under load. So also because of that reason, we should do less volume. Now, I train 7 days a week because I've been lifting weights for 11 years next month. So I'm a little bit more advanced, and so I can handle the additional volume. If you're a total beginner, I would do 3 on, 1 off, or maybe even 3 on, 2 off with this type of program. And the nice thing about this is you can just tack on this arm training to what it is you're already doing that day. And that's all, folks. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that's helpful. I hope that helps you make some arm gains. Please let me know what you want to hear from me next, and I will see you with the next one. Deuces.